We are live, ladies and gentlemen. You're once again welcome to the King Dems Podcast. And today I have with me a very important guest all the way from Massachusetts, United States. Please make welcome Adrian Mendoza. How are
And
you,
so,
Adrian?
so that everybody who's just tuning in knows, Ademola and I have been talking for the last hour. You guys are
I
just
am telling
catching
you,
the second half of this interview. You missed out on the first half, which someone
let me
forgot to
start.
hit record. But man, this is hour two, so let's get into it because hour one was not someone forgot to hit the record button. So
I'm telling you.
we're just filling in. This is already the epilogue of the episode.
I'm telling you, this is already my best episode even before it started. Oh, I forgot to tell them. This is the episode with my destiny helper. So please, you guys, hold this guy responsible. My success or failure in this life is in this man's hands.
I think it's in the dog's hands. Yeah,
So
watch out.
please, if you guys don't see me succeeding on this podcast, right, go and arrest this man. Call 911.
Be careful. I'm sometimes in the UK. You never know. I'm around.
Even in the UK it's 999. Please.
Yeah.
Get get this man, and of course, on the British transport system, they say if you see something that doesn't seem right, speak to British Transport Police. Call 61016. See it, say it, sorted. If you see this man, say it, and let us get it sorted.
You'll notice he's that man. He's carrying a plush dog with him.
Definitely, and of course, is armed and highly dangerous. So approach with
The dog
caution.
is. I'm not. I just carry him.
Approach with caution, please.
The dog bites. I don't.
Oh, come on. But the dog, it's a principal agent relationship.
Okay. he, he works for me, so I
So
just have to. I have
he
to
works for
carry him
you.
around. He's an employee. I have to carry him around.
So whatever it does, who is responsible?
The dog is. He's the one that's going to jail.
No way. It works for you, lives
He,
with you, fed by you,
again, he's
instructed
the
by
dog.
you. And come on. Please, guys, hold this man responsible.
All right, let's kick this thing off, man, before we end up shooting the shit for the next another 2 hours.
From the ground up, we were talking about first generation mentality. You are a product of immigration. I'm a product of immigration. And it's always a beautiful thing seeing immigrants, move from one country to another country, work their asses off, work hard and work smart and make something good out of themselves, make their people proud. Not all of them actually pay it forward.
Well, and part of we were talking about that is, you know, I think most people know Mendoza. I'm an
Mhm.
immigrant of Mexican parents who immigrated in the U.S. in the 60s or 70s. My dad would say, they'd ask him about immigration, and he would say, but I just paid my $60 in the border and I got immigrated and then I walked around through. Because that was the case in the 1960s. And, but at the same time, I grew up in this interesting world. So I grew up in Southern California. A lot of people don't know this. Everyone thinks I'm from the East Coast, but I'm actually from the West Coast. And I grew up in a neighborhood that it was everyone that looked like me. Like everyone was parents of Mexican immigrants. My godmother lived two doors down. My fifth grade teacher lived across the street. And most of the kids that I went to elementary school lived on the same street. And so you live in this little microcosm of a world. But what was also incredible is my dad was an entrepreneur. I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. Like my dad was a carpenter cabinet maker. He had the garage in back. That was a wood shop. So when someone in the neighborhood had a broken window, there was my dad. Half of the time he would remember to charge them. And my mom would get mad because she was the bookkeeper who also worked out of the house. But he was the one driving people around. He was the one fixing the windows and the doors and doing all these things. But it was very much this small community that we lived, that everyone knew each other in this massive mega city of Los Angeles. And so it was interesting because I came from there in 98 and I came to the East Coast where no one had met a Mexican American because I grew up speaking English and Spanish. I grew up with other kids that speak English and Spanish whose stories were the same. Parents came from Mexico, and it was also mostly all Mexico at the time. And then they were working in places, and then the kids were now in that same generation. But we were all going different places. We were going to the East Coast. We were going to Northern California. And so it's interesting because when you come to places like the East Coast, no one had ever met a Mexican American, someone that lived in between. So the kids that were American kids from the East Coast were like, he looks like us, but he's brown and he speaks without an accent. This is weird. And then the kids from Mexico were like, he looks like us. He speaks English, but his Spanish doesn't have an accent. That's really weird. And so we have this saying in Spanish called ni de allí ni de allá. You're not from here, you're not from there. And so kind of the first couple of years that I was on the East Coast is you were kind of living in this weird world of you're kind of in between. And sometimes it's good to be the person that's in between because I ended up following in my dad's footsteps. I became an entrepreneur. Like, I told you this story. We grew up in a household that didn't have a 401k, that didn't have a retirement plan. And guess what? I was working on my own. Didn't have a 401k, didn't have a retirement plan. So you were looking at, so very early on, this idea of building things and wealth building, which is ingrained in every child of an immigrant because we're coming here with sometimes nothing. And we're here to, whether you're in America or you're in the UK, you're here to build your wealth. Yeah, exactly. Right? We're in the lands of opportunity, so that's what we're here for.
I'm
And
telling
so,
you. Because when I came to London in my first year, people were asking me, "Oh, have you been to Trafalgar Square? Have you been to Social Museum? Have you been to that?" You know what I used to tell them?
what?
Excuse me, I am an immigrant. I am not a tourist. There's a difference. So
Exactly.
I can't go to these places. You can go. Don't worry, go. That's the reason why I
Yeah.
came here.
There was people would say, "Oh, you're from California. Do you go see the Hollywood sign?" It was like, "No, I'm not a tourist. I live there. I'm here to, so that like my dad had his wood shop in the house, and
Hmm.
we would like starting at 7 to 10 years old. Like there was no childcare. The whole family would go work on these job sites. Like my dad would renovate houses. We would go. So at the young age, like I was helping with my dad. He wouldn't pay us because it was going to the family, but like we knew exactly we were working Easter, the Christmas, but that was, you know, if you don't come from that entrepreneur mindset,
Hmm.
it's really hard to think like that, to
Hmm.
think about like there, we were talking about the 9 to 5. The 9 to 5 is just a preconceived notion that someone has in their head, but that's not a thing. Like you run a business, if you're a podcast, an award-winning podcaster, if you're,
The
you
best
know,
podcaster in
the
the
best
world.
podcaster in the
The
world,
best one
if
in the
you're
world. We're incoming. We're coming for the number one spot, you know?
exactly, you're going for the number one spot. It's about this is 24/7. That's
Mm.
how it is to be. It's how are you spending that
Hmm.
other half of the day. I have a founder who came up with this saying. He said, "You've got your 9 to 5, but who's got your 5 to 9? What are
Hmm.
you doing in that 5 to 9? What are
Hmm.
you doing to help your community? What are you helping to make yourself grow? What are you helping for your family? Are you building another business between your 5 to 9? Or are you
Hmm.
just sleeping?" And he was like, "No, I'm going to do something with that time." Oh, and I loved that because like at his company, he was a founder and an entrepreneur. And at his company, he had everyone energized about what are you doing on your 5 to 9? And it was the same. They were all either doing volunteer work, they were helping other founders, they were helping the business, but like how you have to live in terms of just because you have a 9 to 5 doesn't mean it stops. So you start thinking about like,
It's not an
how do
excuse.
I just make something bigger? It's not an excuse. It's not you just shut off. It's what am I doing next?
Seriously,
And
for someone like me, for example, like I record podcast episodes at 2 a.m., 4 a.m. in the night. Like we're building a cloud.
yeah, but also at the same time, like, all right, in that 5 to 9, what are you doing for wealth building? Like, what are you building for yourself as a
Yeah.
investor, as an entrepreneur, as an individual? Because the genesis of this conversation, when you reached out, you were like, hey, I want to talk to you about what are you doing in crypto and Bitcoin and what are you talking about cybersecurity? But there's just that opportunity there.
Mm,
Maybe that's your channel to wealth building. Maybe that's
mm,
your channel to do something between the UK or the US in your home country. Like this is about opportunity. I was talking to a guy yesterday and he was very doom and gloom. Oh my God, and tariffs and this and but the stock market. And I was like, in the absence of any opportunity, you make your own. And he was like, how are you so like just
optimistic.
optimistic about this? And I was like, because this is the time to build things. This is the time to wealth build. While everyone else is hiding, I'm going to go over there and do something big. While you're over there distracting and complaining about the world's falling apart, I'm going to go do something over there. And I
I
have
love
this thing.
something. I love something. You very much align with my philosophy, right?
Yeah,
And in my country, we always say something. If you no get evidence, you go explain tire. Do you know the meaning of that? If you don't have
yeah,
evidence, you're going to explain and get tired. Now, look at what's on my wall. I'm going to read it out to you. Things to remember. Tomorrow is a new day. Making mistakes is part of life. Not everyone has to like you. Keep an optimistic attitude. Beauty and strength come from within.
yeah. It's very much like my saying. I tell people like, you may hate me, you may like me, but at least you know who I am. But so there's
Yeah.
this idea of I'm going to go do something new day, but also
Hmm.
we were talking about this. We were talking about the focus
Hmm.
because I even will tell my team here and say, all right, here's what's going to happen. Think of it as like the old sailors that would go around the Cape of Good Hope, the worst seas ever. And you're going to go out there and you're going to see other ships crashing around the rocks. And you're going to see people drowning. Oh my God, I'm drowning. I'm like, we just have to get focused around going around the Cape.
Mm,
Because if you don't, that's how you die. So let's get
exactly.
focused and about what we're going to do, how we're going to change the world, how we're going to make money, how we're going to change people's lives. Because that's at the end of the day. Life is short. Like, it's time to do something.
Hmm.
And that's the key of I wake up every morning and the stuff that we've done. Like, we built wealth for individuals that grew up poor in South Texas, products of a single mom. We've built wealth for people that never thought they would build wealth, and it comes from them taking risks and us supporting them. Like, that's what we do. It's about helping support those that are overlooked but have fire in their belly, that are going to go build a company, and they're the ones waking up 24/7 and they're the ones taking the risk because we did that. Like, that's how we started it all. Is we were founders of a company in 2008, 2009 when the stock market's losing 800 points a day. People are like, "Oh my god, the stock market lost 1700 points." I'm like, "Dude, in 2008, 2009, the stock market was losing 800 points a day." Like like people's life savings were being wiped out. And myself and my wife were like, "We're going to start a company." Because the company I was at was trying to raise money, and one day they call us all in. I just got in breakfast, and I remember this, and they're like, And I'm like, oh, I know what's happening. And they got rid of all of us.
Mm.
They just hired us a year before to like help it. And they're like,
9 to 5,
you're all
you're
gone.
always highly dispensable.
Exactly. Everyone's dispensable. Sorry. And I just hired a guy, and a week later, he and I were all gone. And he had this look at me like, how did you not know? I'm like, I didn't even know. Clearly, I'm as surprised as you are. So then I went to another friend, and we're like, great, we have this idea. We've been talking about it. You got something else to do? I don't. So let's go start it. And that was 2008, 2009. That guy, he took a little bit more time to warm up, but my wife and I were like, all right, we're going to do it. And that's how we built our first business, because we said, look, we're going to, and it's risk, like always. There's always going to be a risk, but when you have nothing and you're starting from the bottom, you have nothing to lose. So why worry about what you're going to lose? The only thing trajectory is up.
Mhm.
And that's literally how we took the risk. And 5, 6 years later, you know, company's doing well. The board says, hey, you guys should go find something to do. You don't have to tell me twice. Let's go. And we were at the same point again of, all right, we did okay. We're not buying an island somewhere. We did okay. How do we trade up? How do we do what we
I
do
love to see you buy an
and trade
island.
up? Yeah, I would have bought an island too. But like, part of wealth building is you got to aspire to something. So we said, all right, we are going to, as people took bets in us, we're going to take
Mm.
that dollars and trade up, because there's the investor Mark Cuban has this saying, all right, you make your own, but you got to trade up. You always trade up. So you take what the winnings that you made, trade up, keep going, keep going, keep going until you get to that island. But it's all
Mm.
about trading up. And that's the thing. It's like, this is the thing that people don't realize when you talk about wealth building. It's one day overnight, you're not going to be a millionaire overnight unless you win the lottery. But like, that's a different story.
Mhm.
Like, you're building a business. This doesn't happen overnight. Your typical company, like the guys who started Uber and Lyft, that was 17 years in the making. This isn't an overnight.
Mhm.
So these founders that start companies that we invest in, or this is time to get there. So you're seeing the trajectory.
Mm.
It's not an overnight success in 5 minutes. Like, it's bam. And so there's multiple opportunities when you're in this idea. It's a mindset of, I'm wealth building. It starts with something small. How do I make this to 2x? How do I make that to 2x? And you're always building up your wealth. It shouldn't be this, oh, until I have it. I think this is where people, when you talk about wealth building, especially coming from first gen, as a first gen,
Exactly,
you,
exactly.
you
They,
think,
they have
oh,
a fixed mindset.
until I'm ready. Oh,
A
I'm
lot of
going to
them
do
think until I have
something.
the capital.
Yeah, until I have the capital, until I'm at a perfect place, until I own my own home. You can just until yourself until you die. But you just have to, while you're young, say, hey, I'm going to take that. And what I tell people that are young, that are just starting out, my advice to you too is, you've got to have 3 buckets.
Mm.
There's my cash bucket. That's what I pay the rent from. That's why, if you want to go on holiday, you go on holiday, or, when you get enough. Then you've got your like long-term bucket. You take $20 from every paycheck. Every time you get something, you're like, hey, I'm going to put something in the stock market. I'm going to put something in mutual funds. I'm going to put something in that I'm never going to touch, because you don't want to touch it. You just want to put that aside. You put it in the piggy bank, but it's not savings. It's like, start investing that. You can do that with
Yeah,
Robinhood now.
like an ETF or something.
Yeah, just simple, like Robinhood. Buy an ETF, set it aside. Don't touch it. You're going to want to. One day you're going to want to be like, oh, I wish I had that. No, put it aside. You want to put some in crypto? Put it in crypto. You want to put some in a crypto ETF? Put it in a crypto ETF. Just boom, but just shove it aside. And then there's your risk bucket when you're ready. And that's the stuff that you should be taking up, whatever, 10% of what you make, or 5%. And you say, well, that's going to create, and that's for you meet a founder who you're like, hey, can I do something with you? You do an idea and you want to invest in something. You want to put some money aside. That is your risk bucket that you should be able to set it on fire, but may generate the biggest return.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times that's where it is. But when you keep that mentality, and while you're getting ready in the upswing to get ready to be that accredited investor in the UK, or you're ready and you're like, have enough, you still want to keep that aside. You still want to put cash to it for the risk bucket, because you never know where an opportunity may come. Someone in our home country says, I have an idea. Hey, I have a company. I have so-and-so. And you're like, all right, well, I could do something there. But like there should always be dollars aside for your risk bucket. Again, it may not be something you're doing now, but you always want to assign money to it, because one day when you are ready, you want to have that little pile that you're ready to go to be like, all right, I'm going to do something with it. And that's how I tell everyone to, when they're starting, to just put it in these 3 buckets. Just treat it like the 3 buckets. Don't touch each bucket.
Mm. Speaking of the risk bucket, there are 3 levels of risk appetites, right? For individuals when it comes to investing. You have the risk lovers, you have the risk neutrals, and you have the risk averse individuals. The risk averse individuals, I don't understand. Like, they are very, very sensitive and sentimental when it comes to taking risks, right? For a person like myself, I see myself as a risk neutral, but like a higher end of the range risk neutral, right? And I discovered that the individuals who are able to achieve the most rewards are the risk lovers and the risk neutrals, or the risk
Absolutely.
averse. I
Well,
don't know, but
well,
I
then,
don't know the mentality behind being a risk averse, individual. Always want to play it safe all the time.
and the part of it is, that's why I came up with these 3 bucket structures that you should put. I mean, you may not put 90% of your bucket into risk. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm on the risk taker side. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like in wealth building mode right now. And if you're in wealth building mode, you've got to do the risk piece of it. I work in risk. We manage risk. There is ways that we deal with it to mitigate the risk. I'm investing in companies and people that I know. I'm not investing in spaces that I don't know. Because the first place the risk takers lose money is investing in something they don't know anything about.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first place you're going to lose money. And that happens everywhere. I should not be investing in real estate. I don't know jack about real estate funds.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what? I should go find someone that knows. I should not be investing in life sciences or biotech or pharmaceuticals. I don't know anything about that. You know what? Let me go find someone that is the expert. And when I talk to people, I'm like, what is that special thing about you that makes you unique, to know exactly what makes you a domain expert? Because we're all domain experts in something.
Oh, yes,
Like, that's
definitely.
the key thing. And so when you find a way to focus on what you know in your
Mm-hmm.
domain, and you're building your wealth along around that,
Mm-hmm.
then you may be a risk taker, but you're inherently de-risking it, because you know exactly what the levers are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so the risk neutrals can learn a little bit about that, because you may not be 90% in the risk bucket. Maybe you're 10%, maybe you're 20%.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the place where you can say, like, there's a concept now in business school it's actually a little old now. It used to be like, what's your superpower? Because in business schools, and I know a lot of people that go to business schools and people that teach at business schools. And in the beginning, 20 years ago, they're like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take people and you're going to train. And let's say you don't know anything about a subject, but now we're going to train you to be that guy. And it just never worked out. But you go and you say, all right, what's your superpower? And it's hard because now it's like they lock people in a room and they're like, figure it out. And people are like, I don't know. Well, if you don't have a superpower, something's wrong with you. You clearly have something that you're good at. It might not be a skill that makes you money. It might not be a skill that's transferable, but like you have something. So you can focus on that being how you do your 9 to 5 or your 5 to 9, and you focus around that superpower, then there's an opportunity of banking success based on what you know how to do. So if the risk neutrals can look at it and say, what do I know? What are spaces? What are things that I know? And you creep closely to it, then you're a way of reducing the risk, just like the risk takers. The non-risk takers, that's the guys that have regret. And so it's interesting. I have this story about a guy, this family, that they ran a great business, and they retired. And I met him for lunch, the husband of this couple-owned business, and he was just like half in tears. And he was like, "Well, this is it. We got to the end." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" They were non-risk takers, but they had a business still. And I said, the business, it paid for your house. It paid for all of your travel. It paid for your kids' education. Your kids went to college. They were, they were kids of immigrants too. And you closed the business down because you were tired. Of course, there's no pot at the end of the rainbow. There's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow because you weren't willing to take the risk to do something with that money. You had this cash flow business. You should have been doing something. You should have been risk neutral. You should have been risk takers because you had this ability. You can't sit back now and say, well, I should have or would have. In the middle of it is when you have to do it. Because by the time you get to the end and you retire and you haven't taken those risks, but you don't have that dollar set aside, they may have some dollars set aside to retire, but there's not going to be this pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. This is where you start when you're young. You start making the cadence. You change behavior to say, I'm a risk neutral. And guess what? Today, I'm going to be risk neutral. But maybe when I get a little more, I'll head up into the risk bucket. And maybe I just had 2 kids. Maybe I'll throttle it back down. It's not an if and when. It is what is this now? But when you have your buckets and you have the plan in place, and you're able to move up and down, this isn't rocket science. You don't need an MBA to do this. You don't need
Are you
a
attacking me?
degree
Are
in
you attacking me?
or a degree, an auditor like
Because you see my
yourself.
profile and you see my
I did.
MBA.
Absolutely. But you know what?
You're
It's kind
trespassing
of
my
common
garden.
sense. I am. I'm just beating you up. I have to. But hey, man, you're a risk taker too. You're saying, hey, I'm going to have the #1 podcast in the world. That's a risk taker.
And for me, I don't know why I like to think of myself as a risk neutral, but a lot of people that know me think I'm a risk taker.
But you know what? It's today you're risk neutral. Tomorrow actually you're kind of taking a risk by going out on your own, but that's what it is to be a risk. But I think what people have to realize, there's what you do in life and then there's your financial plan. And sometimes they'll line up. Sometimes they won't. But people have to remember, you do have to have some level of financial plan. Because if you keep on working on that 9 to 5 and you now have, all right, maybe you have a 401k, but I would say, a majority of people don't understand what's in their 401k. They're not adjusting it. They're not rebalancing it. They're not doing anything with it. It's just sitting there, and then something happens and they're like, oh my God, I have to do something with it.
And of course, you're not even doing that projection adjusting for inflation. You're looking
Exactly.
at,
You're
hard
not
numbers, right?
heavily
I don't
contributing to
know.
it. Yeah.
Financial education is very important.
But also, part of this business, I was talking to a guy who works for us in Texas, and we were talking about this idea of financial education. And like, it started with this idea, like one of the things that no one tells you is, all right, let's say you have these IRAs, you have these, there's ways to use IRAs and 401ks to invest in things that aren't in the stock market.
Mm-hmm.
This is the concept of a self-directed IRA.
Mm-hmm.
And he was really interested in even though he had used one to invest. And I learned about this during this process, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know anything about it. It was someone else that I met and was like, hey, I'm doing this. I'm like, what is this thing? So I just called. We had this concept of if you don't ask, you don't get. So I called
Mm-hmm.
and was like, hey, tell me more about this. I'm like, they're like, yeah, you could use it to invest in, wait, what? In funds, in startups. Then I'm like, could I inherently use this to invest in a house? And they're like, pretty much. I'm like, this is amazing. And all the gains come through it. Again, this is not financial advice. This is financial education. And so this guy, Chris, was like, we should do something about this. We should put this on paper to be like, we're not advertising, we're just educating. That there is ways to do these things that you get from jobs. Because what happens, like you started a job, you have 401k, you go to the next job. Well, guess what? That 401k has to roll over somewhere. If not, you pay taxes on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you get these people that have these pieces of things. They're now working for 10 years. They started after they went to college or after they couldn't work, and they have these things. And then all of a sudden they're like, I need to do something with them, or they just became an accredited investor. And so a lot of it is about finding these elements that allow you to build wealth that you just need to be educated. Like, because the people that are buying the islands, they have interesting ways that you and I haven't even considered, that I have heard about. These mechanics, these things where like, well, you do this and then you do this and then you don't pay taxes. And I'm like,
And the
this is
special purpose
gotta be,
vehicle companies.
yeah, I'll use an example. Like, they put it into insurance plans. They put it into this. Like, this is like, when I heard some of this stuff, I'm like, this is gotta be, but it's like financial engineering at its finest.
I'm
Those
telling you.
individuals, they're not concerned about what tariffs, they're not concerned about the market. They're outside of it.
Yeah, and you know something, for someone like myself, I've been really privileged to study some of this, would I say, financial engineering, because while at the Big Four, I was an auditor, and being an auditor, you have that privilege, right, to see the structure of certain global organizations, the way the companies, intersect. Some group of companies, pretty much a complex structure. You have a parent company, you have the subsidiaries, you have the sub-subsidiaries. You see how you have certain associates, you have affiliates, and you see the money trail, how different companies are doing different things and all serving the purpose of the parent company. But the unfortunate thing, with a lot of auditors and consultants, they just come with the mentality of, I just want to audit this company, mark prepared, mark reviewed, and go to the next one. But for me, I've always been about the business acumen. I'm not here to just come and be marking prepared or marking reviewed. I'm studying the structures of these companies so that when I go out, I can set up my own. I can consult for these guys, right? Because
Yeah,
one thing
that's
is the
exactly it.
knowledge, they can't steal it from you.
That's exactly it. I mean, that's kind of like, so I've been in the investing business now for 9 years. Like, we started January 2016, and the stories that I've heard, the structures that I've seen, it's stuff that, like, there was some stuff that I was like, this is gotta be fake. And
And
it was
some of
real.
them take
And it was
advantage of the
real.
tax havens. They take
Absolutely.
advantage of tax
Like,
havens. Monaco, Panama, what's this other place?
oh, I'll tell you right
Sao
now.
Tome,
Uh, Luxembourg,
Luxembourg,
the Caymans. And it's
Cayman
funny
Islands.
because, yeah, and it was interesting because when I talk to investors in the US, like, a lot of them are concerned with what to do with gains. A lot of them are concerned with taxes. But I'm like, dude, like most of the largest investors in the world, like they're not paying taxes. They've
Hmm.
figured out the mechanics of to put it in the Caymans, to put it in other places.
Yeah, even
They're
Bermuda.
distributing
Some of them use Bermuda,
exactly Bermuda too.
Singapore, British Virgin Islands. Like, come on. So
Well,
quite
and this is what's interesting because when you look at the investors in the UK, in Europe,
even
in
even
Asia, they've
Mauritius in the
figured it out.
UK. In the UK, a lot of them use Jersey and Isle of Man.
Wyoming, like, is
Yeah,
the new one. I mean,
yeah.
it wasn't it, and you can remind me, Wyoming was where a lot of the crypto investors. They're
Mm-hmm.
now in
What?
Puerto Rico.
Yeah, Puerto Rico, Panama, Belize, Antigua and
Yeah.
Barbuda.
But it's funny because there's so much conversation in the US about this, but
I'm
I'm
trying to
like,
remember one
you
name.
could, yeah, but
Turks
you
and
could,
Is it Turks
Turks
and
and
Caicos
Caicos
Island?
too. Yeah, yeah. But like, you don't have to go far. You could do it in Wyoming. You could do it in Puerto Rico. I mean, people forget that in Florida in the US, you don't pay, state income taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like people don't have to go that far to realize that, like, where there's all these concerns, but they're happening here. And that's what's really interesting is to when you're thinking about this, when you're thinking about wealth building, you have to have the mindset to be like, all right. And it's interesting because I talk to a lot of business owners. A lot of times I'll talk to people and they're like not thinking about what if an event happens? What if they do sell a business? What else? What if they have a distribution? Like they're not thinking about they're just paying their taxes. And it's like, okay, great. Like, what are you actually thinking? Could you take a portion of it and start using it for philanthropy? Can you take a portion to then help that first gen community and that was actually something that we recently did was to say, and it wasn't that hard. It was crazy. We said we should do something with some of our gains and focus on the philanthropy aspect because I was getting approached by people to be like, hey, you should donate some dollars here and you should help us over here. And so we were like, this is kind of crazy. And so we looked into it and we're like, we brought someone on to help us and they were like, yeah, you should build your own nonprofit. And so I was like, this is hard. This shouldn't be a thing. It's really not that hard. There's like a service called like Nonprofit in a Box. You pay $5,000, they build a nonprofit for you. And I was like, this has got to be a joke. No, it's real. And then it took 8 months. We have the nonprofit, lines up with the mission statements. The following year, we are like, oh, we've got to do the taxes. Well, I audit 3 funds in house. We have 3 venture funds. We have an outside auditor. We have a CPA. We have a fund management. We're doing everything that you are doing. We do it in house. We do it here. And so then I was like, I should find someone to help me with the taxes on the nonprofit. And I find out it's literally one form in the US, the Form 990. Well, and if you're under 50K, you just hit submit. And I was like, this has got to be a joke. No, it's real. Wait, what? And then there's an annual fee, and that's $150. And I was like, and then I found out that like 60-70% of nonprofits are out of compliance in the United States. I was like, how is that the case? It's one form. It's like,
It's
this isn't that
information.
complicated. It's all
Information is
information.
power.
It's information is power. And I was just talking to someone recently and said, oh, I'm talking to this service and they're going to charge us $2,500 a year. And I was like, wait a minute, but your annual report fee is $150. Where's the other $2,000 going? It's all just information.
I always say something. If you're not informed, you're deformed.
Yeah. But all of this came from just talking to other people. And when you start
Hmm.
digging them, and it's hard because as a first gen, one of the things I see is that we don't talk about money. We're
Yes.
never
Yeah.
clearly talking about, and if you're not talking about money, you're not talking about anything
Yeah.
because
If
we're
you don't
told
make
and
money, it
taught
don't make sense.
exactly because we're told, oh no, let's not talk about that. Let's
Yeah.
not talk
People are too
about what other
sensitive about
people.
money.
Yeah, I remember. Um, oh my God, this is early 2000. I was around a group of small engineers. They're all young. They're all my age. One of them's a little younger. And this is right in the dot-com boom. And one of them was like, they were talking about like extending one of their contracts or something like that at the company because we were all consultants. And I was like, you guys don't know what you each other make? They're like, no, we can't talk about that. I said, why? Like, we're coming in with this consultant. Like, we should all be talking about what we're each making. And it was all people that were kids of immigrants, like women, people of color. Like, we should be talking about this. And they were like, you're right. I'm like, why aren't you talking about it? And it found out that all of us were making different rates. And they were like, how did you get that? I'm like, I asked. They're like, wait, what? So then one of them went back and it was like, I want this. And they're like, okay. Because she just asked.
Mm-hmm.
Because
You
it
don't get it
was,
because you don't ask.
you don't get it, you don't ask. But it was this thing about, we don't talk about money, so we shouldn't be talking about money. I'm like, no, that's where you get your power, is talking about money. And then when you talk about investing and you talk about startups and you talk about it, it's another thing. People aren't talking about money. How are you investing your money? In what ways? And one of the things that broke me out is to 9 years ago when we were like, okay, we need to talk about this. Like, I get approached all the time with people, funny enough, not asking about financial advice, because I'm not in the business of giving financial advice. I'm in the business of teaching people how to do it, the mechanics of it. And I will get people out of the blue that were like, how did you do this? How did you do this? And it was because people were being told, oh, we shouldn't talk about it. But I'm like, no, we should be talking about how to do it. So that idea of that self-directed IRA, I tell everybody now, this is how you should be doing it. And some people have come to me and you're like, you're right. I didn't think I had the money to do something, to wealth build, until you put this in my head to realize, oh, wait, I do have that ability. And it's not about ability. It's that going back to until I'm ready enough. Well, guess what? They're now sitting on 50K that was sitting in an IRA, and they're like, you're right. I should be taking control of that. My wife has a really good thing that she talks about is everyone approaches her and was like, well, I saw that you guys invest in women. I saw you invest in diverse founders. Well, I'm not an accredited investor. What can I do? And I was like, and she always comes back to people and says, you want to do something? You have a 401k, right? She's like, yeah, I have my job. Then you should ask, who manages my money? Is it a woman or is it a person of color? Do they look like me? And you wouldn't believe, as soon as she says that, you unlock some power in them to say, you're right. I can do something. It's because we talked about money. If you
It
don't
reminds me
talk
of the
about
portion
money,
of the Bible, Matthew chapter 7, verse 7. Ask and you shall be given. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be opened unto thee.
you teach a man to fish. He learns how to
You fed him
fish.
for a lifetime. Or if you
Exactly.
give a man a fish, you just fed him for a day. So would you
Exactly.
rather feed someone for a day or feed him for a lifetime?
But like, that's the thing in both of our cultures. We just don't talk about it. And so
Yeah.
it's really, for me, it's like become a mission to get it for us to talk about it, because the more of us that are out there talking about it, the more we get it out there to realize that you can do this. It is a career goal. It is a career aspiration, that this idea of like, I want one day in Mexican households that they're talking about wealth building over.
But you know something, for those of us who talk about it, especially like persons like myself who are still on the younger side, I don't know, they see me as arrogant. And I'm like, excuse me? I am not arrogant. I think you are ignorant. But I don't know. I think I had to develop a thick skin for my 20s, not caring about people liking me because it's even on my wall. Not everyone has to like you. Would label you as that arrogant individual because you want to talk about money, you want to talk about wealth building. They see these things as sensitive, but I know you can also relate because African culture, Latin culture, Asian culture are kind of similar. But what's your take? Like, what would I say? How can I be in some way diplomatic to get my message, you know, past? Sometimes you're saying the right thing, but it seems like you're saying it in the wrong way, and it rubs off on people not in a very nice way. But one thing I realize is I offend people in the short run, but in the long run, they come back and say, "Oh wow, you told me the truth last year." I'm like, "Oh, did it take you 12 months to realize I told you the truth?"
Well, I think in your case, you have a podcast. I don't think you have to be diplomatic. I think you just have to say it. But I think here's the thing, like if we are keep on focusing on people's feelings and
Mm-hmm.
we keep on sugarcoating the advice, they're never going to get the advice. I have a really good story. I have a I have I have a friend of mine who was a family friend. Really, I've known like their family forever. He's a real estate attorney.
Mm-hmm.
And one day, this was like 20 years ago, not one day, this was like 25 years ago. We finally, like, my wife and I bought our first house, like right after we got married. Like, we were like, hey, we've been saving our money, we're going to buy our first house. And he said, well, we didn't know anything about this. So someone was like, we're like, go to the bank. Hey, I'm looking for a mortgage. And they said, you need a real estate attorney. And I was like, what the hell is that? Well, I had that family member. She's like, I'm a real estate attorney. Oh my God. So I go to her and she's like, oh, here's the bill. And I was like, wait, what? And she was like, well, Adrian, here's the thing that I've learned in my business. If I helped you and I give you advice, you're not going to listen to it because you didn't pay for it.
Mm,
And I was
true.
like, man, what a great idea of, she's like, if you don't pay for it, you don't put value in the advice. And you
Exactly.
always need to value the advice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, and I've always carried that with me because in my world, you will meet people that incredible people that are taking the risk, but
Mm-hmm.
they're bombarded by advice. Because
Yeah.
here's the thing, when you finally open up the aperture and you're talking about wealth building, you are going to get advice from everywhere. You should do this. You should do this.
Exactly.
And you
Exactly.
really have to curate the advice you get
Yeah. Filter the
to
noise.
filter the noise because 99% of it's going to be noise. Everyone's going to have an opinion whether you should be talking about money. You should not be talking about money. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's just noise. Like, if you don't filter the noise, you're going to drown in noise. But the idea is to start always with this true north conviction of this is what I want to do. And that's why we were talking about that, of this idea of I'm going to be wealth building. Everything I do
Mm-hmm.
today, especially as a you know, first gen immigrant, is to say, no, I'm going to be wealth building. And there's going to be distractions and there's going to be this, but you have to really focus on this idea of it is a priority.
Mm-hmm.
Because the ones that don't make it priority end up getting distracted. Because part of it is to, when you are thinking about this, you open yourself up to interesting opportunities that are not going to be in your 9 to 5. Because when you're
Exactly.
risk and you're risk neutral, you open yourself up to the idea of what risk could be. And it doesn't always have to be an investment risk. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
always have to be, a startup or
Mm-hmm.
investment, or it could be the risk of I'm going to follow this thread to learn about something,
Mm-hmm.
to then get myself thinking in a different mindset or give me a skill set that I didn't have a month ago. And I
Exactly.
even do this, like, I do this with our own team, is when we bring someone on, I'm like, okay, there's the job you do, there's the job, all of it. But part of it, what you should do is give yourself an opportunity to go down the rabbit hole, to
Mm-hmm.
learn about something, to have conversations, to just go down the rabbit hole, whether something comes out of it or not. It's what there's a guy who works with us named Adam. He's been with us for like 6 years. And he says
Adam
every
Smith.
day, good old Adam is in the swirl. And people were like, well, Adam, what's the swirl? And he says every morning I come in and I just let myself get distracted. I'm reading, I'm talking to people, I'm just in this swirl. And he's like, sometimes you're just in the swirl and nothing happens. Other
Mm,
times in the swirl, you make connections. You introduce this person to this person. You read this article, you meet this person. Like you never know who you're going to meet. And sometimes, like it goes nowhere. Sometimes it's incredible. A couple of years ago, I was reading this article from this company and I really liked the guy that got quoted. You know what did I do? One day I was just like, I'm going to reach out to him on LinkedIn. And I did. And the guy did a call with us and said, Adrian, I never check my inbox on LinkedIn. I never
mm,
check my messages anywhere. And today that I just decided to check it and I was like, I'm going to take a chance. And I just responded to him. We ended up with one of my companies building a great partnership with his company throughout it. And years later, he had ended up leaving the company. He went to another one. I gave him an update and said, you know that we built something together, right? He was like, wait, what? And he's like, yeah, because of that risk that you took to take that phone call and connect with us, we were able to take this portion, connect them to that portion. And because of that, we're still talking now.
mm.
But it takes
I
that. I
love
mean,
that. I
again,
love that. It
but it's
sounds like
all
me.
about just, that's exactly it. And it doesn't have to be anything big. It's
I'm telling
just
you,
reaching
just
out
go for
to
it.
just,
Go for it. There have been guests I've had on this podcast just because I saw them doing something great, and I said, okay, I'll reach out to this person, and you'll just be surprised. They'll answer you.
yeah, because you never know.
You
If,
just never know.
if you don't ask, you don't get.
Mm,
But part of it is to give yourself that flexibility to be like, I'm just going to learn about this. I'm going to be like, just give yourself that flexibility because you never know what's going to happen. And
mm,
that's the thing that like I do every day is it's why I do the podcast because you never know the incredible people I'm going to meet. You never know the
exactly.
interesting topics we're going to talk about. You never know who you're going to meet, who you're going to talk to, because something may not happen now. It might happen 5 years ago. You may meet someone and we're like, you need to talk to that guy. It's how
Mhm.
we were talking early today. And I was like, do I have a guy you need to meet?
I,
Like you
I'm
were like,
telling, I am telling you.
yes, but that's what it's going to take.
I am
It's to
telling you.
be the
And
connector.
remember, like lately was when I instituted the whole guest appearance fees, and I'm like, I need this fee to achieve this outcome, and a lot of the guys that have booked me previously just cancelled. And then I saw a certain Adrian Mendoza. I sent him the same message as these other people, and then he was happy to book. I'm like, okay, who is this
Yeah,
Adrian?
because I saw your background and we're
In my
like,
head, I was like, okay,
hey,
it's like this is
let's
my
do
destiny
something
helper.
together. Well, let's do. It's about what are we doing together? Instead of you coming in, it's but you should be asking for this. So I have a good
Hmm.
example. Like I talk to people who go and do speaking. They speak at
Hmm.
conferences, they speak there,
Hmm.
and the women and the people of color, I talk to them and they're doing it for free. And I was like,
Hmm.
why are you doing this for free? And you talk to the joke I said, the white guy that went to Stanford, they're charging like $20,000 for a speaking fee. And, we're talking about like next to nothing here. He's getting paid $20,000. I was talking to another guy and he's like, oh yeah, they pay for my airfare and they pay for my hotel. But the guys that look like us are like doing it for free. And I was like, wait a minute. And I started doing that a couple of years ago hey, here's my speaker fee because that's what it takes. And it wasn't about The money was about this idea of like, no, time has value.
Value.
Exactly. And if we don't value our time, how can you and I give advice if we don't value our time? But that's the important piece about it, is to be like, no, everybody's time has value.
Mm-hmm.
What makes that person's time more important than your person's time?
Mm-hmm.
But it's part of it is that's this idea of when you are wealth building, that
Mm-hmm.
everything has to be around that idea.
Mm-hmm.
Because the one thing that like people ask me like, what's the one thing that you have that you can't make up, you can't get more of? And I tell
Mm-hmm.
people it's time.
It's time.
It's not money, not
It's time.
reputation. It's
It's
time.
time.
Yeah.
It's time.
You
You know
can
something I always say
lose.
on the podcast, right? I always say something that I don't take people's time for granted, right? The SI unit for measuring life is time. And if somebody's sharing
Exactly.
their time with you, it means they're sharing their life with you. And if somebody's sharing their life with you, do not waste their life.
Exactly. And so
And
what I always
always,
try,
always appreciate it because gratitude is
and
good attitude.
well, and what I always do, and this is the thing, is if you're in this mindset, don't be afraid to connect someone with another person.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had a
Yes.
really good person that I knew, and when we were tech founders, he had this idea of like always end it with, what can I do for you? Instead
Mm-hmm.
of what can you do for me,
Yes.
it's what can I do for you?
Mm-hmm.
And so that when you have this idea, it's why I'm always like, hey, I should connect you to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes something will happen, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it won't, but you
Yes.
just met a new person.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can focus around that, and it's like, okay, what do I give back into the world around
Mm-hmm.
me? Because that's one of the incredible things that about both of our cultures.
Mm-hmm.
We're about helping our community, giving
Mm-hmm.
back, because there's always this concept of family. And
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the
Yeah.
things that I think gets lost in, the financial world. I think it gets lost. But if you can bring that back into your idea of wealth building, where you're not just
Mm-hmm.
wealth building for you, you're wealth building for your family, you're
Mm-hmm.
wealth building for the people that are coming after you to make it
Mm-hmm.
easier for them to wealth build, then it'll get easier for you to wealth build. But it takes that portion of, doesn't have to be money. It could be
Mm-hmm.
advice. It could be connections.
Yeah.
It could be an introduction. It could be an anecdote. It could
Network.
be something that just helps someone make a connection,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what this world is about. It's about making connections.
Yeah.
And we've had certain
Networking
people that,
basically.
exactly, because that's how you're going to find the next opportunity. That's where you find the next job. That's where you're going to find the next co-host. That's where you're going to find the next guest. It's just
Mm-hmm.
building this connection. And the reality is, like, people always ask us about the venture capital business and the private equity business.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the one piece is, that's the piece. It's, I
Yeah.
always get young people to come to me and we're like, how do I get into this business? And the advice I give them is like, all right, three things. Time, what we just talked about. Don't
Mm-hmm.
waste your time. Focus on what makes your time amazing. Two, going back to that thing about the superpower.
Mm-hmm.
What's your superpower? Like, what makes you unique? And tell everyone what makes you unique.
Exactly, exactly. But you know no problem, right? I like the fact that your culture and my culture are similar, right? Now let's talk about the the superpower, right? And you were talking about how, when you do an MBA, they try to help you find, your superpower. For some people, they call it your USP, your unique selling point, right? Yeah, when I was doing my MBA, I think that was the word they used, your unique selling point. When I was doing economics, they they call it your area of competitive advantage, right? And then I was telling somebody something that growing up, I was in the choir. I used to sing, right? But why didn't I take music seriously? Because I always saw so many people that were more talented than myself, musically. So I always knew that even though I was talented in
Yeah.
music, I, I don't like to fool myself. I'm not always the best musician in the room, so why will I take it? Why will I invest my energy into it?
But here's the thing about it.
But
I'm going to
I've
get to
always
the
been the best speaker, the best presenter in the room, right?
exactly.
And
Well,
when I tell my mom that, Mom, I am the best podcaster in the world, she says, let's tone it down. Don't let people hear. I'm like, see, they have to hear it.
exactly. Well, and I'll
Because
tell
if
you
I don't say it, like, how will it happen?
exactly. Well, and I'll tell you
African
the
culture,
third.
we are taught to hide our gifts, for the fear of people, not being jealous of you and, trying to, pull you down.
Well,
And I'm
and
sure
it's funny
that's the same
because
thing on your
and it's
end.
funny because in Australian culture, I didn't know this. They have something called the tall poppy
Tall
syndrome.
poppy, yeah, the tall poppy
Yeah,
syndrome. I know about
because
it in
because
Australia and New Zealand.
and I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, because
Tall
the
poppy is
tallest
probably going
poppy
to pull you down.
gets
Like,
gets pulled down. But guess what? Like, all right, who is who is one of the top crypto investors in Australia? It's actually a guy by the name of Fred, who's referred to
okay,
as the Crypto King. And I've got to find this interview with Fred. He's actually the co-founder of a company called Finder.com that's self-funded.
okay.
And Fred was like, I'm going to be the Crypto King. And people were like, oh, I don't know if you could say that, Fred. And every time you hear him interviewed, he's like, if you're going to make it in the world, you have to be the tallest poppy.
I'm
He's like, you
telling you.
can't focus on being cut down. You can't focus on what if you're going to get cut down. And
I don't care.
I love that. And because of that, like when you see pictures of him, Fred has like a big mohawk. Fred is like, his hair is colored. And, Fred's like now investing in real estate. And they're like, oh, that's the crypto palace. But I'm like, well, you guys didn't do it, but Fred did. And that's
Hmm.
the thing that it's going to take. But I love that idea of just having to walk in and say, this is our culture.
Hmm.
I'm going to go against the grain. I'm going to be
Hmm.
completely different.
Hmm.
And
Right.
that's the
I'm a break from
thing.
the norm, and
Exactly. But it
but they
takes you
always
to
tag you as
do that.
arrogant. That is the problem.
Yeah. But
They
you
say
know
you're not
what?
humble.
If you goes back to we were talking about this, you can't care about what people say about you. You just have to do it. Because as
I
I said, it doesn't
spoiler
matter if
alert,
you
I
like
stopped caring a long time ago.
exactly. You can't care about it because once in a while you're going to do something that's going to piss people off, but you can't. You've got to be like, I've got my direction. Be Fred. I got my direction. I'm going to do this over here. Funny enough, we're an investor in Fred's company.
Wow. Wow.
So I'm like, you know what? I'm all about Fred. Don't be the tall poppy.
Then you should be an investor in my company too.
But see, that's what
Because
it's
I'm
going
the
to
friend of
take.
Africa.
So again, I'm going to have the third piece of the advice. The third piece of advice when people come and ask me, and that's where I think this is like between all of our culture and that superpower. It's, first is your time, then your superpower.
Hmm.
The third one is your network.
Hmm.
Like the one thing that we each have is our network.
Hmm.
That's like a piece that you have to leverage
Hmm.
because that's the one thing I tell everybody. And it's funny because when, like, let's say a founder or someone that works for us, I literally say, go look at my LinkedIn, go find people you want to meet, and I'm happy to
Hmm.
introduce you to them. Because that's the thing. It goes back to the network. It's like, who do you know? Who do you want to meet? Because part of it is when I did my grad school, and this was a lesson learned because we were like, was teamed up with another buddy of mine that was Latino. And we were supposed to write a case study in B school. And I was like, I don't know. I came up with this crazy case study of like, I want to write about the Apple Newton. Nobody's written about the Apple Newton. Nobody cares. So I wrote this, we wrote this paper and we're like, and so we were encouraged because we were at an MBA to be like, great, now go talk to the people. And I was like, wait, what? And they were like, yeah, now your job I don't really care about what you have to say. Go talk to the people that you mentioned there. So myself, being that this is not in our culture,
Talk is
this is
cheap. Walk
dog
is
is cheap. Exactly. But this is what it's going to take to break out of this norm, this behavior. So what did we
yeah.
do? And this is like this is 99, 2000. This is pre iPhone. This is kind of emails out there. We just get on the phone and we're like, all right, I don't know where to start. By the time we were done, we were interviewing John Scully, the ex-CEO of Apple,
Wow.
and he took
Wow.
our call. And we shot the shit with him, and he told us about skiing, and he's like, "Oh my God, your other partners from Chile. I love skiing in Chile." Like, who would have thought? And that guy who is my classmate, I just saw him about a month ago, and he was like, "Do you remember that we did that? How crazy is that?" And so then I was like, "Yeah, you're right." But then I
Mm.
keep on going. I find the guy who introduced Steve Jobs to the Lisa computer at IBM, who worked on this project. And that was another one that I just reached out. Hey, I'd like to talk to you. I didn't think I'd hear anything. I get a phone call from like random phone number. And this woman is like, hey, the guy's name is Larry Tesler. And he's like, hey, I'm Larry's assistant. He's happy to talk to you. He's doing a layover between Boston because he's flying out to somewhere else, to Europe or something. He's going to give you like 2 hours. Oh, incredible. It's just for asking. So I got to interview. And he's like, yeah, this is where this book is wrong and this book is wrong. And here's the information that's correct. And by the way, you were right about this and this you have to change. It was really amazing. And that's where I realized that the network that you're building of people that you know is incredible because you never know who you're going to meet. But it takes
Exactly.
you as, but again, you've got to be in that mindset and you can't be like what we learned. You can't be that, in order to be that, you have to be that tall poppy. You have to go out, wade from out of your comfort zone
Mm-hmm.
to go and do the ask, but at the same time, learn about it. And when you're learning about it, it's also okay to say, hey, that's pretty cool. I did that. It's like my friend last month who was like, do you remember that we did that? Like, how incredible was it that we were able to get the ex-CEO of Apple on a phone with us to talk about this crazy paper that you just wrote as a case study that you just came up in your head. And we're like, we should write about this. Like, how crazy is that? And that's where I think the advice to anyone that's listening, it's you're going to hear the people that says you can't do that, but you have to
Mm-hmm.
live in the mindset of I can't.
Always. They will tell you.
Because
They will
there
always
are,
tell you.
because if you think about like the, the right now, the US economy is being held up by 7 tech stocks.
Mm.
Those 7 tech stocks, they started from somebody who said, hey, I have this stupid idea.
Mm.
I have this crazy idea. Like, that built a business that's now holding up part of the US economy. Like when you think about that, like think about those that may not have IPO'd, but like I'll tell you the story. Like our first investment was 2 guys out of South Texas, products of a single mom that the guy, one of them, they're both Mexican. One of them is like dad passes away when he's really young. And in order to find his opportunity, he literally is able to scrape up $100 from all of his family members and he takes the bus to Chicago. He lands in Chicago without a coat because he has an aunt there. And he ends up going to high school there. He ends up going to college there. He ends up getting his first job in like security. He then takes it forward as he's in high school, as in college. He sends money back home to send the next brother to go to Chicago, to go to school. They
Mm.
send money back home to get his sister. They send money to go back home. And now the whole family has college degrees, high school degrees, because it took him to take that risk.
Mm.
So, move the full story. His brother and him are still working. And he has this idea, and he's like, I want to start a tech company. And his brother is like, I don't want to take that risk. And it's funny because afterwards, his brother said, his wife went to him and said, Dino, one day you're going to look back and you're going to say, I wish I had taken that risk. So he takes the risk with his brother. They start a cybersecurity startup. And one day we had just started our firm in 2016. And I ran into someone who, same thing. He was part of the crew of what can I do? And he said, Adrian, if I ever find someone that could just use a little bit of push just to get you out there, do you mind if I said, yeah, of course. I'm happy to meet someone. 6 months later, I met these two brothers and they were like, hey, we want to do something. And I was like, I'm happy to help you. And till this date, they say, well, Adrian, one, not only did he look like us, but he knew where we came from. Okay, roll the clock back forward. They have a company, they have employees, they're going to raise money. Their biggest partner decides to buy them. It generated a 10x for us in 5 months. It generated a big liquidity event for them. We all went out to dinner one day, and so one of the engineers, who is like maybe like, oh my God, we celebrated like 5 times. That one of the engineers is like 21, living in his mom's basement. Now he's doing really, I mean, he did really well. And I was like, are you going to move out of your mom's basement? And he's like, no.
Saving up the box. I like that.
Exactly. But like, roll the clock forward. One of the guy who was the CEO, got married in San Antonio. They picked it up. They all moved from Boston. They bought their mom a house. They bought houses themselves. They now live in Oxford, Texas. They went back home because they were like, we're going to take what we did. We're going to go home. And he got married and he rented out. He went in San Antonio. He rented out an art museum for him and his Mexican family, and they served tacos. That's the potential of what wealth building can be. And so then his brother spoke. His wife's sister-in-law spoke. And then he asked his investor to speak. So I spoke at his wedding.
Wow.
But that's,
what did you say? What did you say?
oh, it was funny. I even said that. And, but part of it was about taking risks. You know, what I spoke about was that it took these two guys to take a risk. And sometimes it pays off. Sometimes it doesn't pay off.
Yes.
But the fact that you take the risk to do something. And to this point, like the guy who is the founder, Aldo, he and I are still friends. He and I talk every other week. He and I are.
I love something you said, right? It's about taking risks. Sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't. And it aligns with something Nelson Mandela, the former president of South Africa, said during his lifetime. He said, if we fight, we may win, but if we don't, we have lost.
Yeah. You never know if you don't take that risk. In that case, it paid off. In some cases, I meet founders, it doesn't pay off. But at least they knew they took the risk. And it was funny because at the same time, I was mentoring another founder. She was local in Boston and she was running her company. She was doing okay. She was putting a lot of money into the company. And she got to a point where she came to me and said, I don't know if I can keep going. And I said, all right, the decision to keep going is up to you. And so she came back and she's like, I think I'm done. And we're like, okay, we're going to wind it down. And the next week she came back and she didn't mope about it. She wasn't like, oh my God. She turned that failure into a success. She said, all right, I've now got to think about that 9-to-5 job. And so she applied for a job. The job, because she had also someone talking to her behind their corner being like, you should do that. Don't apply for that job. Apply for the C-level job. She got it. She became a chief revenue officer And as I'm talking to her, I said, you should ask for a board seat in the company. She's like, I don't know if I can do that. Just ask. She got a
Just
board seat.
ask.
She sits on the board of that company now.
Wow.
And so she took that startup failure and made it into a success because she was like,
Mm,
and the company was like, wow, you had your own company? This is
mm,
amazing. This is exactly the experience that we want in our company, to think like
mm,
an entrepreneur. She still sits on their board. She's still doing great. But it's, you know what? It's that ability, because she took the risk, massive success for her.
mm,
But again, it's not going to be a straight line. It's not going to be like, oh, I'm going to, what my partner says, the boy Cinderella story. I'm just going to do this, and then I'm going to be a IPO and own an island somewhere. Sometimes you're going to do the road less traveled, but like the
the
success
dirty work.
isn't, yeah, it's the dirty work,
Get your
but
hands
it's
dirty.
about,
Knee deep
but exactly.
in the
Sometimes that's what
mud.
it's good. Sometimes
In the
that's what it's going to
quagmires.
take. Sometimes that's what it's going to take. And if you can do that and you're willing to do the work, which most of us that come from our families and who are kids of immigrants can,
Mm,
then that's the ability to do success. And that's how you've got to think about wealth building. It's
mm.
not going to be clean.
Well,
It's going to
no.
be in the mud. It's going to be dirty. Sometimes you got to do some crazy things. But if you're willing to, it was interesting because there's an author who writes about urbanism. And I have to find this graph somewhere. It's hidden in one of his books. His name is Mike Davis. And he writes about LA. He writes about the four ecologies of Los Angeles. And there is a book that he writes about Latino cultures in California. Very interesting. And he writes about how, in order to get one person that's an immigrant to the
Mm-hmm.
status of your traditional white family in the US, indifferent whether it's African American, Asian Americans, Latino Americans,
Mm-hmm.
that you're going to have to skip certain generations. So for Asian Americans, you're skipping 2 to 4 generations. For African
Mm-hmm.
Americans, you're skipping 6 to 8 generations. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're literally, in order to get to that, it's going to take you maybe up to 6 generations that you're going to skip. So when you do what we do and you're taking that risk, you may skip 6 generations in one lifetime to get to that point.
May God bless you. May God bless you. Look, Chris, what you're saying right now very much aligns with the previous guest on this podcast, right? He's a founder. He's an American, Devontae Stepter. Before we started, just like you and I were discussing, like for an hour before we started this podcast, I was discussing with him, and the fact that he's a black founder, like I was pretty much fond of him and was giving him some financial advice, financial education. And by the time we started the podcast, he said something on the board. He said, what I've learned from you, like I really, really appreciate talking to you. What I've learned from you in 1 hour is more financial education than I've learned in my lifetime. And one of the things I was telling him is the concept of the vicious cycle of poverty. And that is what you're talking about. That is, before you can break the poverty chain, you need an external force. And what persons like yourself, myself, we are the tall poppies. We are the rebels of our generation. Because stupidity is when you keep doing the same thing the same way and you expect a different result. You can't have a different result,
Yeah.
right?
Well, but
So you just keep having the poverty.
like part
My
of it,
father
what
was
it's going
poor,
to take.
the child is poor,
Exactly.
the grandchild is poor. No, somebody has to break it. Somebody has to break
But
it.
part of it is, once you break it and you skip 3, 4, 6 generations, you need to have the realism to realize that you've just done this, and you can't always bring everyone, but you can try.
Yeah,
but
but it only
sometimes
takes
it is
that
going to
umpire
be
to break
very
it.
different. Exactly. Well, not everyone that breaks it goes out to say, I'm going to break it. When you do break it,
The
and you
mentality.
do skip the mentality, and you do skip the generations, one, you're not going to be, you have a different mindset already
Mm-hmm.
because you've done it.
Yeah.
You have, and so I've mentored people that I've told
Mm,
them to be like, hey, you're going to do this.
mm,
And when you do it, I'm going to give you a piece of advice. And they're like,
mm,
what? They're like, you're going to come back and you're going to go back to your neighborhood. You're going to go back to the culture. You're going to go back to that family.
mm,
And you realize, hey, I think they're different.
mm-hmm.
They're like, no, they're not the ones that are different. You're the one that's different.
Exactly.
And when they do that, and you think about that, that in order to
Mm,
break that generational shift,
mm-hmm.
that you are going to be different by doing that,
Mm-hmm.
then one, you have to come to the realization that yes, you're going to be the guy, that man or woman that does it. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's all right. Once that's settled and you're like, okay, I did this, and you're now living a different life, I challenge everyone to be like, great, now you need to give back.
Mm,
It doesn't have to be with dollars. It could be with intros. It could be with connections. It could be about giving that advice.
mm-hmm.
I have a saying that in order to achieve success, you need to climb with one hand, lifting yourself up, but with the other hand, bringing the same person up behind you.
We rise by lifting others. There is no success without a successor. And the Bible says something, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. I always tell people poverty or wealth is a function of your mindset. Some people have a fixed mindset, some people have a growth mindset. So you pick what you want. For me, I always go for the growth mindset. I don't ever like to be restricted. Never. And, bring it the community talk, right? The Jews in America are literally the most successful uh, ethnic group in America. And there's this book my father gave me, The Jew Phenomenon. He talked about 7 principles that actually makes the Jews wealth driven, wealthy. The 7 secrets that, to the wealth of the Jews, right? If you want, we could talk about the 7 principles, but the Latino community, the African American
Hmm.
community, we're not practicing these things, right?
I mean, I'll tell you another example. So I lived in a all Latino community. And next door, where there was a building that was owned by a white family, that they were, these were originally all Anglo neighborhoods in Southern California
Hmm.
that then started passing away. That actually were originally like Italian American neighborhoods. Like, who would have thought LA had an Italian American? But like people would tell us these stories about these neighborhoods. And then, Latinos came in to these neighborhoods. And then as certain people were transitioning out, then you started having the Asian American community, Chinese immigrants coming in. And we had this just wonderful family. They were from mainland China and they
Mm,
bought this little duplex. And my dad would always help them. And they were just
mm,
like incredible neighbors. They're still there. And one day, the neighbor, her name was Alicia, she came to my dad and we were just talking about we're talking about what we're having now. And she
mm,
looked at him and said, you do know how we do this, right? My dad was like, wait, what? She's like, when we come, she's like, you notice that a lot of us come from the same village, the same city in China or Hong Kong or
mm,
Canton. She's like, when we come here, we come with this growth and a group mentality where we
mm,
have to all win together. And she's
mm,
like, so when we come, she's like, look at our family. We all pooled our money and we bought this building together. We
mm,
then bought a business together. We all ran that business, all of us, all of the families, all of the kids. We didn't pay for anything. We just did this ourselves. And as
Mm.
soon as we were successful, what did we do? We all together bought another business and we bought another house. And then we kept on going so that all of the families that came together as a group bought houses and businesses.
Mm.
And it was like just like an explosive mindset because it was this idea of we do it as a community. And when we
Exactly.
win, we all win. And what was incredible about it was the fact that my dad and I looked at each other and were like, that's not our community. Like,
Exactly.
that's not the Latino, even though we're focused on family and we're focused on this piece. That was the piece that's missing. And until we did that, I mean, it's something that I still look at it right now. And when I talk about the community, the Latino community, the success that you build has to be in there. I'll use a good example. Like I was at an event at Harvard's management company, like it's the endowment. And I met one of the most prolific Black investors, Willie Woods. And people
Mm.
were walking in and taking pictures with Willie. And so I managed to get to Willie and I was like, hey, Willie, I want to add you and ask you an advice. How did you guys do it? Because in the United States, one of the things that you don't know is that there's a culture of Black men in private equity that's now been around for 20, 30 years that are in some of the larger private equity funds and he said to me, Adrian, I'm going to give you this advice. He said, we didn't always start off like that. And one day, me and Mike Porter, we said, we have to change this. So he said, we're going to follow that same thing. We're going to do it all together. And they did. And so what they did, he's like, we would vacation together. We would hang out together. When one of us started a fund, we would hire from within. When one of us needed fundraising, we would all pitch in. And he's like, and that's how you do it. Just like the neighbor. They were doing exactly the same model. And one of the hard things is I still am very much challenge this in our own communities to be like, this is how we have to think. We can't
Mm.
just think to ourselves. When you have that growth mindset, you have to think about growing what you do, but
Mhm.
also the portion around you and the community and the culture around you so that
Support.
we
Support.
and it's not just support, but it's so that everyone, all of us are benefiting. Because
Hmm.
if you do it and I do it, it's great. But if we get 10 other people to do it,
Hmm.
then all of a sudden that is an incredible way of building wealth, not just for us, but building wealth around the community around us.
And that's the only way you can achieve that. I always end with the fact that gratitude is good attitude. I'm really, really grateful for your time. I'm really grateful for your time. It's really great having you. And of course, definitely you have to tell your PA to set the time for our next episode. From me to you, it's nothing but love and respect. And do you want to leave a shout out to anybody before you leave?
Yeah, I want to say a shout out to the people that make it possible on my side, to Chris from Texas, to the group of people, our fellows, Amber, Enrique, Esther, that are also like me, that come from immigrant communities that are making this possible.
Wow. And of
And
course,
Adam, of course, there's Adam,
shout out
who's
to
right
Adam.
now in this world, and to
Apple
the little people that do it make it possible.
to the dog,
To the
the
dog,
agent.
to the agent, to the guy that when you see him in London, you need to be like, that's the troublemaker.
And of course, shout out to the people who are watching us today. Like, share, subscribe, support. We appreciate you. Love and respect from me to you. God bless you guys. And of course, see you soon again.
Bye, guys.